14:37 on a frozen afternoon in late November 1943, Lieutenant Otto Carius sat in the commander's cupola of his Tiger tank near Vitebsk, Belarus, watching Soviet aircraft make their seventh strafing run of the hour. The temperature had dropped to -23 degrees Celsius. Ice crystals formed on the vision blocks. The Tiger's Maybach HL 230 engine idled roughly, burning precious fuel just to keep the oil from freezing solid in the crankcase. 21 years old, 47 confirmed tank kills, and absolutely no patience left for the constant buzzing overhead. Carius had been rejected twice from military service for being underweight before finally being accepted in May 1940. His own father had called tanks metal death traps and begged him to stay in the infantry. But the young man from Zweibrücken had something to prove, and he proved it with every Soviet tank that burned under his crew's guns. The IL-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft had been circling his platoon for nearly 90 minutes, their machine guns hammering against the Tigers, 100 frontal armor like hail against a barn roof. The Soviets called the IL-2 the flying tank. German soldiers called it the Black Death. Its armored cockpit could shrug off rifle fire and light flak. Its twin 23mm cannons and underwing rockets had destroyed thousands of German vehicles since Stalingrad. But against a Tiger's frontal armor, even the IL-2 was impotent. The bullets weren't penetrating. They couldn't penetrate, but the noise was driving his gunner insane. Unteroffizier Kramer sat hunched over his gun sight, fingers white-knuckled around the turret traverse controls, muttering curses that would have made a Prussian drill sergeant blush. Every 8 to 10 minutes, another Soviet pilot would line up his approach, dive toward the German tanks, empty his ammunition into hulls that simply absorbed the punishment, then pull up and circle for another pass. The strategy made no tactical sense. Soviet command knew their 7.62 and 12. 7 rounds couldn't destroy a Tiger, but they also knew the psychological effect of constant harassment. Keep the German tankers buttoned up inside their steel boxes. Keep them deaf from the impacts. Keep them exhausted from the tension. Eventually, someone would make a mistake. Carius had been dealing with Soviet air attacks since his first day on the Eastern Front. The Luftwaffe had owned the skies in 1941 during Operation Barbarossa. German Messerschmitts and Stukas had roamed freely, destroying Soviet aircraft on the ground and in the air. By late 1943, that dominance had evaporated completely. Soviet factories beyond the Urals were producing aircraft faster than German pilots could shoot them down. The Yakovlev Yak-9 and Lavochkin La-5 had closed the performance gap with German fighters. The Red Air Force controlled the battlefield during daylight hours, and German tank crews learned to move at night or accept the constant attention from above. The 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion had lost 3 Tigers to air attack in the previous month alone. Not to direct hits, which the armor could withstand, but to engine fires caused by incendiary rounds penetrating the rear deck. To track damage from near-miss bombs. To crews who abandoned their vehicles under sustained attack only to be cut down by strafing runs as they fled. The Tiger I was the most feared tank on the Eastern Front. 57 tons of Krupp steel armed with the legendary 88 and KWK-36 cannon. That gun could destroy any Soviet tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The T-34, the KV-1, even the new IS-2 heavy tanks, all of them burned when the 88 spoke. In British firing trials after the war, a gunner scored 5 successive hits from 1,200 yards at a target just 16 by 18 inches. The gun's accuracy was almost supernatural, its stopping power absolute. The Tiger's armor was equally formidable. 100 of face-hardened steel protected the front hull and turret. Soviet 76 rounds bounced off harmlessly at combat ranges. Even the vaunted T had to close to suicidal distances to have any chance of penetration. German tank crews joked that driving a Tiger was like being wrapped in a steel blanket woven by the gods themselves. But the Tiger had one critical weakness that Soviet commanders exploited relentlessly. It couldn't shoot back at aircraft. The 88 gun that made the Tiger so deadly against armor had been derived from the 8cm Flak 36 anti-aircraft gun, the same weapon that defended German cities against Allied bombers, the same gun that had torn apart British tanks at Hafia Pass in North Africa, where German gunners destroyed over 100 Matildas and Crusaders in a single engagement. The Flak 88 had earned the nickname the 88 from terrified Allied soldiers who learned to recognize its distinctive crack. The irony was bitter. Germany had developed the 88 specifically to shoot down aircraft. In the 1920s, Krupp engineers working secretly in Sweden had designed a gun capable of reaching bombers at maximum altitude. The weapon exceeded all expectations. It could fire 15 to 20 rounds per minute. Its shells traveled at 773 meters per second. Against aircraft or armor, the 88 was equally lethal. When German engineers needed a main gun for their new heavy tank, they turned naturally to the 88. The KWK-36 tank gun shared ammunition and ballistics with its anti-aircraft ancestor. Same shell, same velocity, same killing power. The only difference was the mounting. The Flak 88 could elevate to 85 degrees, tracking aircraft across the entire sky. The Tiger's KWK-36 could only elevate to 17 degrees, barely above the horizon. In theory, a Tiger could elevate its main gun and engage aircraft just like its anti-aircraft ancestor. In practice, the turret's maximum elevation of only 17 degrees made such shots nearly impossible. The gun could point at the horizon. It could not point at the sky. Soviet pilots knew this. They flew their attack runs with confidence, diving at angles that kept them above the Tiger's engagement envelope. Carius watched them through his commander's periscope, tracking their flight paths, noting their patterns. The IL-2 pilots were predictable. They approached from the southeast, following the same ground reference points, pulling up at approximately the same altitude. Professional aviators flying a routine mission against targets that couldn't fight back. Kramer's frustration had been building for weeks. The 23-year-old gunner from Bavaria had joined Carius's crew in early 1943 after proving himself as one of the best shots in the 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion. Before the war, he had worked in his family's machine shop, developing an instinctive understanding of trajectory and timing. His reflexes were exceptional. His range estimation bordered on supernatural. In tank versus tank engagements, Kramer could put an 88 round through a T-34's turret ring at 1,500 meters, while both vehicles were moving across rough terrain. He had destroyed 31 Soviet tanks in less than a year of combat. The Tiger's gun sight made precision shooting possible. The terms Invulnerable 9B provided too. 5x magnification with graduation marks that allowed the gunner to estimate range based on target size. Kramer had memorized the apparent dimensions of every Soviet tank. He knew that a T-34 at 1,000 meters filled exactly 4 mil marks in his sight. He knew that an IS-2 at the same range appeared slightly larger. He calculated ballistic drops and lead angles instinctively, the way a baseball pitcher calculates the arc of a fastball. But against aircraft, his skills meant nothing. He sat in his gunner's seat and listened to bullets bounce off armor he couldn't retaliate against. The 8th strafing run began at 14:41. Carius heard the distinctive drone of the Mikulin M38 engine before he saw the aircraft. The IL-2 came in low from the southeast, exactly as predicted, its pilot lining up on the second Tiger in the platoon. Machine gun fire erupted. Tracers arced through the gray winter sky. Bullets sparked against steel. "That's it," Kramer said. Carius looked down from his cupola. His gunner was already traversing the turret, not toward a ground target, but upward toward the attacking aircraft. The move made no sense. The Tiger's gun couldn't elevate high enough to track a diving plane, but Kramer wasn't trying to track. He was anticipating. The IL-2's attack run followed a predictable trajectory. Dive toward the tanks. Open fire at approximately 400 meters. Pull up and climb away at approximately 150 meters. The pull-out maneuver was the critical moment. For perhaps 2 to 3 seconds, the aircraft would be flying level, directly in front of the Tiger, at an altitude that might just barely fall within the 88 gun's engagement arc. Kramer had been calculating angles for weeks. He had watched dozens of strafing runs, timing the approaches, measuring the pull-out altitudes with his gunner's eye. The geometry was marginal. The aircraft would be at the extreme upper limit of what the Tiger's elevation could reach. But marginal was not impossible. "Kramer," Carius said, "you cannot be serious." "I am very serious, Herr Lieutenant." Carius considered ordering his gunner to stand down. The shot was absurd. No tank had ever successfully engaged an aircraft with its main gun. The variables were too extreme. A moving target traveling at over 400 kilometers per hour. A gun designed for engaging stationary or slow-moving ground targets. A turret that rotated at a maximum speed of 6 degrees per second when the Tiger's engine was running. The mathematics demanded failure. But Carius had learned something about mathematics on the Eastern Front. The mathematics said German tanks should have been overwhelmed by Soviet numbers months ago. The mathematics said his battalion should have been destroyed at Kursk. The mathematics said a single Tiger could not hold a crossroads against 15 T-34s. Yet here they were, still fighting, still surviving, still winning engagements that should have been impossible. "Do it," Carius said. Kramer began tracking the next IL-2 as it circled for another approach. He elevated the 88 gun to its maximum 17 degrees. He traversed the turret toward the southeast, anticipating the aircraft's attack vector. He controlled his breathing the same way he did before engaging enemy tanks. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Finger resting lightly on the electrical firing trigger. The Soviet pilot began his 9th run at 14:47. The IL-2 dove toward the Tigers, engines screaming, machine guns already firing. Bullets hammered against Carius's tank. Inside the turret, the noise was deafening. Kramer ignored it completely. His eyes were fixed on his gun sight, watching the sky where the aircraft would appear after completing its pullout. The IL-2 flashed past overhead. Carius felt the Tiger shudder from multiple impacts. The aircraft pulled up, climbing away, presenting its belly to the German tanks for exactly the 2 seconds Kramer had predicted. Kramer fired. The 88 cannon roared. 10 kilograms of high-explosive death screamed upward at 773 meters per second. The shell crossed the distance to the aircraft in less than half a second, and missed. The round passed behind the IL-2's tail by what Carius estimated as 3 to 4 meters. Not a significant miss by artillery standards, but against an aircraft, a miss by any distance was still a miss. The Soviet pilot continued climbing, apparently unaware of how close he had come to dying in a way no pilot should ever die. Kramer said nothing. He worked the semi-automatic breech, ejecting the spent casing, chambering a fresh round. His hands moved with the mechanical precision of a man who had loaded and fired this gun hundreds of times. When he spoke, his voice was calm. "I was behind him. I need to lead more on the next pass." Carius should have stopped this. The first shot had been an interesting experiment. Continuing was simply wasting ammunition that might be needed against Soviet armor. But he recognized the look in Kramer's eyes. The same focus he showed when engaging T-34s. The same absolute concentration that made him one of the deadliest gunners on the Eastern Front. "One more attempt," Carius said. "Then we stop this foolishness." The IL-2 pilot circled back for his 10th run. He had no idea that his previous approach had nearly ended in disaster. He had no reason to alter his attack pattern. Soviet ground attack doctrine emphasized consistency. Fly the same approach. Maintain the same altitude. Trust your aircraft's armor to protect you from ground fire. The IL-2's armored bathtub could stop most machine gun rounds. No ground-based weapon could threaten you. Kramer watched the aircraft through his gun sight. He had calculated his lead error from the first shot. The IL-2 was faster than he anticipated, or his reaction time was slower. Either way, he needed to fire earlier, not by much. Perhaps half a second. But in aerial gunnery, half a second was the difference between a kill and a clean miss. The IL-2 began its dive at 14:52. Machine guns opened fire. Tracers reached down toward the German tanks. Bullets sparked against steel. The aircraft screamed toward them, engine howling, pilot committed to his attack run. Kramer tracked the approach through sound alone. His eyes remained fixed on the patch of sky where the pullout would occur. He felt the Tiger shake from bullet impacts. He heard Carius shouting something from the cupola. He blocked it all out. The IL-2 flashed past. Kramer saw it enter his gunsight picture. Dark green fuselage, red star on the wing. Pilot's goggled face visible through the canopy. The aircraft was pulling up, climbing away, exactly where he had predicted. Kramer fired 1/2 second earlier than before. The 88 Michelle caught the IL-2 on its right wing. The impact was catastrophic. The round punched through the wing structure and detonated inside the fuel tank. A fireball erupted. The wing folded upward, tearing away from the fuselage. The aircraft rolled inverted, spiraling toward the frozen ground, trailing smoke and flame. Inside the Tiger, Carius watched through his periscope as the Soviet aircraft crashed into a snow-covered field 400 meters behind their position. The explosion sent a pillar of black smoke rising into the gray sky. Debris scattered across the winter landscape. No parachute appeared. Did that just happen? Carius asked. Kramer was already traversing the turret back to its neutral position. His voice carried the same flat professionalism it always did after a successful engagement. Target destroyed, Herr Lieutenant. Carius stared at the burning wreckage. In more than 2 years of combat on the Eastern Front, he had seen countless impossible things. He had watched single tanks hold off entire companies. He had seen crews survive direct hits that should have killed everyone inside. He had witnessed acts of courage and brutality that defied explanation. But he had never seen a tank shoot down an aircraft. The remaining Soviet pilots had witnessed it too. Their radio frequencies erupted with confused chatter. One of their number had been destroyed by ground fire, but not by anti-aircraft guns. The kill had come from a tank, from the main gun of a German heavy tank, from a weapon that was not supposed to be capable of engaging aircraft. The strafing runs stopped. For the next 3 hours, no Soviet aircraft approached Carius's platoon. The pilots circled at high altitude, maintaining observation but refusing to make attack runs. Word spread through the Red Air Force channels. The Germans had developed a new anti-aircraft capability. Their Tiger tanks could shoot down aircraft. The tactical situation had changed. It hadn't changed, of course. Kramer's shot had been 1 part skill and 9 parts luck. The geometry remained impossible. The Tiger's limited elevation still made aerial engagement nearly suicidal for any gunner attempting it. But the Soviet pilots didn't know that. They had seen one of their own die in a way that violated everything they understood about ground attack aviation. That evening, Carius filed his after-action report. He described the engagement in precise military language: time of contact, ammunition expended, target destroyed. He mentioned Kramer by name, crediting his gunner with the kill. The report went up the chain of command, where officers who had never seen combat read it with skepticism and filed it away. But within the 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion, the story spread like wildfire. Kramer had shot down a plane with the tank's main gun. A Tiger had killed an IL-2. The impossible had happened, and everyone wanted to know the details. Carius deflected most questions to his gunner. Kramer, characteristically modest, described the shot as luck and changed the subject. He didn't want fame. He didn't want recognition. He wanted to survive the war and go home to his family in Bavaria. Shooting down aircraft was not part of that plan. What Kramer didn't mention was the calculation. The hours he had spent watching Soviet attack runs, timing their approaches, estimating their pull-out altitudes. The mental geometry, required to predict where a 400 km/h target would be when his 773-meter-per-second shell arrived. The patience to wait through 8 unsuccessful runs before taking his first shot. The discipline to analyze his miss and adjust his aim for the second attempt. The shot wasn't luck. It was the product of the same skills that made Kramer deadly against Soviet tanks: observation, calculation, patience, execution. He had simply applied those skills to a target that happened to be flying instead of driving. The Soviet Air Force never forgot that day. After-action reports from the Vitebsk sector included warnings about German anti-aircraft capabilities. Pilots were instructed to increase their attack altitudes when engaging Tiger tanks. Some commanders ordered their aircraft to avoid Tigers entirely, focusing their attacks on lighter German vehicles that couldn't shoot back. The psychological impact far exceeded the tactical significance. 1 aircraft destroyed, 1 pilot killed. In the vast calculus of the Eastern Front, where thousands died every day, the numbers were insignificant. But the demonstration of capability mattered. German tanks could kill aircraft. The IL-2 pilots who had operated with impunity now faced a new threat, however statistically unlikely. The 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion was one of the first German units equipped with the Tiger Eye, formed in May 1942 at Neuruppin. The battalion had been intended for North Africa, but was diverted to the Eastern Front after the disaster at Stalingrad. By late 1943, the unit had fought at Leningrad, participated in the massive tank battle at Kursk, and earned a reputation as one of the most effective armored formations in the Wehrmacht. The battalion operated on the principle that quality could overcome quantity. A single Tiger, properly positioned and commanded, could destroy an entire company of Soviet tanks before being forced to withdraw. The mathematics favored German crews in individual engagements, but the Eastern Front was not decided by individual engagements. It was decided by the endless flood of Soviet armor that replaced every loss within days. Germany built 1,347 Tigers during the entire war. The Soviet Union built over 57,000 T-34s. The numbers told the ultimate story. Carius and his crew continued fighting through the winter of 1943-44. The Tiger's mechanical reliability deteriorated in the brutal cold. Engines refused to start. Tracks froze to the ground. The 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion lost vehicles to mechanical failure as often as enemy action. But they kept fighting. Kramer never shot down another aircraft. The opportunity never presented itself with the same favorable geometry. Soviet pilots learned to vary their attack patterns. They approached from different angles, pulled out at different altitudes, never gave German gunners the predictable trajectory that Kramer had exploited. The trick only worked once, but once was enough to earn Kramer a place in military history. His shot became legend, repeated in barracks and mess halls across the Eastern Front. Tank crews who had never met him swore they knew someone who had seen it happen. The story grew with each retelling. 1 aircraft became 2, 2 became 5. By the war's end, some versions had Kramer single-handedly clearing the skies over an entire sector. The truth was more modest, but no less remarkable. 1 gunner, frustrated by weeks of harassment, had decided to attempt the impossible. 1 shot, calculated with the same precision applied to tank engagements, had connected with a target traveling faster than any tank could move. 1 kill had demonstrated that the boundaries of warfare were not as fixed as doctrine suggested. Carius wrote about the incident in his post-war memoir, Tigers in the Mud. His account was characteristically understated. My gunner, Unteroffizier Kramer, can take credit for a deed that was probably unparalleled on the Eastern Front. That is, he succeeded in shooting down a Russian fighter with the Tiger tank cannon. The book became a classic among military historians and tank enthusiasts. Carius's detailed descriptions of armored warfare provided invaluable insights into the Eastern Front. His technical explanations of Tiger tank operations, maintenance challenges, and tactical employment became required reading at military academies. The memoir was translated into multiple languages and inspired adaptations in unexpected places. In 1998, legendary Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki, creator of Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, published a watercolor manga adaptation of Tigers in the Mud. The six-episode series, titled Otto, Carius, Tigers Covered with Mud, appeared in Model Graphics magazine. Miyazaki even traveled to Germany to meet Carius at his pharmacy, photographing the elderly tank commander and his establishment for reference. Carius's account of the aircraft kill was often cited as one of the most unusual combat engagements of the Second World War. Military historians debated whether other such incidents had occurred without being documented. The consensus was that Kramer's shot, while not unique in concept, was almost certainly unique in execution. No other verified account exists of a tank destroying an aircraft with its main gun during World War II. Otto Carius survived the war. He was wounded 5 times, including a near-fatal encounter in July 1944 when Soviet soldiers shot him through the leg, arm, back, and neck. His Tiger crews rescued him in what he described as a Hollywood-style operation. After recovering, he returned to combat, eventually commanding a company of Jag Tiger tank destroyers in the final months of the war. After Germany's surrender, Carius studied pharmacy at Heidelberg University. The transition from tank commander to pharmacist seemed impossibly distant, but Carius approached his new profession with the same methodical intensity he had applied to armored warfare. He graduated in 1954 and spent 2 years as a clerk pharmacist at the Fortuna Apotheke in his hometown of Zweibrücken. In 1956, he opened his own pharmacy in the small town of Hirschweiler-Petersheim in Rhineland-Palatinate. He named it the Tiger Apotheke, a tribute to the tank he had commanded through the worst fighting of the Eastern Front. The pharmacy's logo featured a stylized tiger tank, and the interior displayed memorabilia from Carius's military service. Regular customers grew accustomed to seeing the elderly pharmacist pause to answer questions from military historians and tank enthusiasts who made pilgrimages to meet the legendary Panzer commander. The Tiger Apotheke became a local institution. Carius ran it for more than 54 years, serving the small community through the economic miracle of post-war Germany and into the 21st century. He retired on January 31, 2011, at the age of 88, the same number as the gun that had made him famous. Carius died on January 24, 2015, at the age of 92. He was one of the last surviving Tiger tank commanders from World War II. His funeral was attended by military historians, former soldiers, and tank enthusiasts from across Europe. The Tiger Apotheke continued operating under new ownership, preserving the legacy of the man who had turned a small-town pharmacy into a pilgrimage site for students of armored warfare. His memoir remained in print, translated into 17 languages, read by new generations of military historians and tank enthusiasts who wanted to understand what it felt like to command a tiger in combat. The book's enduring popularity testified to Carius's skill as a storyteller and his willingness to describe the war honestly, without glorification or excessive self-promotion. Kramer's fate is less documented. The war consumed many of its participants, and not everyone left records that survived the chaos of Germany's defeat. But somewhere in the archives, in the faded pages of unit logs and after-action reports, his name appears next to an entry that no other gunner in history could claim. Aircraft destroyed. 1. Method: 88 tank gun. The Tiger I tank represented the peak of German armored engineering during the Second World War. Its 88 gun could destroy any Allied tank at unprecedented ranges. Its armor could withstand hits that would have penetrated lesser vehicles. But the Tiger's greatest asset was never its specifications. It was the men who crewed it. Men like Otto Carius, who turned tactical disadvantages into victories through audacity and skill. Men like Unteroffizier Kramer, who refused to accept that certain targets were impossible. Men who looked at a sky full of enemy aircraft and asked the question that military doctrine said should never be asked. What if we shot back? The answer changed everything for one frozen afternoon near Vitebsk. The 88 gun's heritage made the answer possible. The weapon had begun life as an anti-aircraft gun, designed specifically to destroy aircraft flying at high altitude. German engineers had adapted it for tank use, creating the KWK-36 that armed the Tiger. Either gun's ballistics remained unchanged. Its shells still flew at velocities capable of intercepting aircraft. Only the mounting had changed, limiting elevation to angles suited for ground combat. Kramer worked within those limitations. He couldn't track an aircraft through its attack dive. The turret was too slow, the elevation too restricted. But he could predict where the aircraft would be during its brief moment of vulnerability. He could pre-aim at that spot and fire at exactly the right instant. He could let the aircraft fly into his shell instead of trying to chase it with his gun. The technique required perfect timing. It required intimate knowledge of Soviet attack patterns. It required the nerve to sit still while enemy rounds hammered against your tank, trusting that the armor would hold until your moment came. And it required the marksmanship to hit a target smaller than any tank, moving faster than any vehicle, at a distance that allowed no margin for error. No training manual covered this scenario. No instructor at Panzer School explained how to engage aircraft with a tank's main gun. Kramer developed the technique through observation and intuition, applying skills meant for ground combat to a problem that ground forces were not supposed to solve. That improvisation defined the German approach to armored warfare. Outnumbered on every front, facing enemies with superior industrial capacity, German tank crews survived through creativity and aggression. They developed tactics that exploited their vehicles' strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. They found solutions to problems that doctrine said were unsolvable. The IL-2 Sturmovik that Kramer destroyed was one of over 36,000 produced during the war. The Soviet Union built more IL-2s than any other military aircraft in history. Losing one to a tank gun was statistically meaningless, but warfare is not fought by statistics. It is fought by men who must believe they can win even when the numbers say otherwise. For a few hours on a frozen afternoon near Vitebsk, the Soviet pilots believed they could lose to an enemy they had dominated for months. That belief changed their behavior, reduced their effectiveness, gave German ground forces a respite from constant aerial harassment. One impossible shot had accomplished what no amount of conventional anti-aircraft fire could achieve. This is the story of how a Tiger tank shot down a Soviet plane, not through technological superiority, not through numerical advantage, but through the skill and determination of one gunner who refused to accept that the sky was off-limits. If you want to see more forgotten stories from the Second World War, please hit that like button. It helps us share these untold histories with more viewers. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're rescuing remarkable stories from dusty archives every single day. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Are you from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, Australia? Our community spans the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in armored units. Tell us if you've ever heard of Otto Carius before this video. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure that Unteroffizier Kramer's impossible shot doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.